after taking a poll in YouTube here, I asked people what you guys wanted to see next, and you said a diorama with a few figures, so I went ahead and started. I got the trophy base as usual and some plastic that I bought to make the base. And you got to remember, a base is like a picture frame. It's a very important aspect to the diorama. I used the Tamiya 251/D. It's a great kit. I got some photo etch, which I hate photo etch, but I got some anyway, and I've got tracks from AFV to use on it. Obviously, to me, it's a great kit. It's kind of older. The diorama starts out as a sketch, then I make a mock-up using the top from the box. And of course, the base I use is the ones with the acrylic covers. It's important to make these mock-ups so everything fits for your diorama, because you're going to have to keep messing with it as you build. So I start out cutting the plastic to make some sides for the elevation of the diorama, and everything's cut out and snapped using an X-Acto knife. Measurements are important, and I have to keep checking to make sure everything fits, because there'll be a problem in closing up the diorama, putting the acrylic top back on it. It's nice using the styrene because liquid cement works well. I used Mr. Surfacer to do a test because I'm always having a hard time painting this base. There's some type of acrylic and nothing sticks to it, not even the glue hardly. I had to rough it up to get things to stick as far as the top there. See, I'm practicing with some glues. So I've tested the sides I've made for the diorama, the elevation. Obviously put it on the base and then see if the acrylic clear cover fits. And I've got this thing, the tolerance is really kind of close. I don't want to have them that close, but sometimes it comes out that way. But this one worked, thank God. So I had to make a false bottom because I was worried about it not gluing down to the base. That way I could screw it down. I did add some Gorilla Glue underneath for just added adhesion. And then of course the styrofoam is put in to fill the void for the groundwork. I used the Gorilla Glue to glue the foam in. And once it's all glued in, then I'm going to put something on top to weight it down and let it dry overnight. The foam, I've been using foam for a long time this way. Before everybody ever thought of it, I was using foam back in the 80s. Not like they're using it today though. And my walls were very crude. So I'm using a hot cutter here for styrofoam to flesh out the groundwork. And this part, man, you love to see this as a model builder when you get to some points, and this is one point that you're just like, wow, this is going to be cool. Now it's time to start working on the kit. And as I said, Tamiya kit, really nice, goes together. It's it's a build that you can do in a couple days. The tracks probably took the longest, and some of the detail painting. But I love Tamiya kits. Who doesn't? I should have put the wheels on there. They go on to the chassis separate, and I could have done that. It would have made the tracks easier, and the interior painting was done. And then I used some markers to paint the seats and a couple other things inside the vehicle. There's some photo etch in there, and I hate photo etch. I'm not very good at it. The interior's painted now, complete. It's just not weathered. I go on to the tracks. The tracks have the pads separate from the tracks themselves. The way I've started assembling tracks years ago was I assembled the tracks, glue them, and while the glue is setting and still flexible, and I think a lot of other guys do this now. You just add the tracks on while they're still flexible, as I said, and glue them all down, make sure the sag looks good. Tracks are such an important aspect on a tank model. You want everything to look straight. And then I added the pads after everything had dried. I didn't worry about the pads on the bottom. You weren't going to see them. So now I get the Magic Sculpt out, my favorite modeling putty. And I start with the groundwork. And I do pieces at a time because this stuff dries in about an hour. So I do little sections. I just love using this. I know a lot of guys are using the AK brown looking groundwork, but I really like this. I can mold it and sculpt it, and I know you can with the other stuff too, but this becomes hard as a rock. And I know it won't mess up. There's just way less chance of something happening. It's my preference now, and I just love using it. It's a go-to. I know how it reacts. So while it's still wet, I poured a little bit of fine sand onto it while it's drying, and then obviously here you see I'm making some ruts for the road, and then the track from the Tamiya kit was used to press into the base just for where the tracks for other vehicles or this vehicle was used, and then he either drove off by accident or they were going to try to drive through here as a shortcut. But anyway, you get the gist. It's life. A problem happens. Sometimes you don't know how the heck did you do that, but it happened. And these guys obviously got stuck somewhat. So I'm off now into making more in the base with the groundwork. So I needed a nice straight couple of sticks I got from trees out back in my yard. Just cut with a razor saw here so I could add to the diorama. Obviously, Hurricane Forest, you got some trees in the valleys. You had the more leafy trees up in the higher elevations. You had the pines. So I'm in a lower elevation here in the Hurricane Forest. At least that's where I'm envisioning in my head. Get some nice roots from trees and bushes that last year round. Those are the ones you can get nice roots from. And those are obviously put in because they are going to protrude into the water area from the trees growing up there. Magic Sculpt was used to flesh out the trees. As you can see here, I flatten out some Magic Sculpt, and then I start wrapping it around the tree branch that I put into the base. Just pressing it in with my fingers. Want to get it all on there, and it's as I said, my favorite sculpting material. And once this is done, then I'm gonna sculpt in the details to the trees, as you can see on the other ones on the other side there. I use a little tool. It's actually an old leather needle which I had laying around. You could use any kind of metal here. It's just I see something and I use it. I rough in the bark here a little bit with that tool, and then I get an X-Acto knife so I can do the rest. This adds just more and more detail. You want layers and layers of detail. The more detail you put in, the better it's going to look in the final piece. And then with a toothpick, I've fleshed out and added some detail to broken branches and so where they make knot holes in the tree. And as I said, just use a toothpick. And for the root system, just more Magic Sculpt. Tree roots were used for the branches. They're glued into holes I made and then put in with super glue. The base was painted all black, flat black, and then hit with a little bit of white to bring out details. I knew I had a lot of equipment. I sprayed it right on the sprue black and then hit it with a white highlight. And then I'm off to starting some colors onto the base. And I've used a few different earth tones here. You want to build up a lot of different colors. I've said it before in the videos, you don't want a monotone look in any of your colors. You want to keep as many tones built up, layer over layer. It's time for the static grass. Putting that in just with white PVA glue. Most of this is just kind of filler around the tracks, because I had a hard time when I put the Magic Sculpt getting the terrain to fit exactly under the tracks like I wanted, but it worked out okay. I could have done a little bit better job on that. So obviously once the static grass goes on and dries, as you can see here, then I'm going to get the airbrush out and start spraying it with a dark green. I paint everything on the groundwork pretty much except for the leaves I add later. A little bit of dry brushing to bring out some detail in the grass. Most of it won't be seen anyway. Now it's time for the wash. Once again, one more layer of color. The more layers of tones and colors you put over each other, the more it comes to life. I can't express how important it is to get away from anything monotone looking on a diorama. I started painting the trees using artist oils, and a lot of it is just a dry brushing because I'd already put a wash over the trees. So it's dry brushing different tones, and then in the shadowed areas I'm going to go ahead and use black. And because the trees are still wet, the oils take a while to dry, I can put shadow colors in there like that, just going into the different areas where I feel there should be shadows, or bring out more tones and color and depth for it. And then with pastels, I always use pastels instead of pigments. You can use pigments for this. I just scrub in some tone colors into the groundwork. I just scrub it in, and it ends up sticking. It's not going to come out once you scrub it in. And then with a olive color, I'm going to start using to make the moss in the trees. I start off with this olive color, and after applying the olive color to the still wet oils on the tree, then I add a little brighter green over the top of the olive, just to give it more tones. As I said, you want more tones, never the same color. Then it was time to start pouring the water. I used the 2-part clear epoxy, and I did it in layers and added some color to it. The kit is pretty much done. I've still got some painting to do, but before that, any other extra details done, like some detail to the welds, and then the whole vehicle's painted flat black. You can see I stuffed some tissue inside, and then after the flat black, I hit it with red brown TS1, just kind of hit it and tone it up just to get that brownish look. The figures are from Dragon, the 37mm pack gun. I just looked online for some figures. I wanted them in great coats because it seemed like that's what the Germans wore a lot in the Hurtgen Forest, from the photos I was finding and videos. So I got this kit because of the figures in the great coats. I thought, okay, I can make them into a crew working the vehicle. They come in pieces. They were really, really nice figures, but I got Hornet heads as replacements and changed some arms and stuff like that to get the poses. Obviously the crew is going to pull this thing out. It's so much fun getting everything put together and starting to see the scene come to life that you have in your head. I get a dark armor yellow by Tamiya and start putting the tones on. I work my way up, never spraying the whole thing usually. Sometimes I do, but when I do airbrushing like this, I start building up the colors. darker to lighter. So I will use the Tamiya dark yellow here and put it on. And then I'll go ahead and mix a little bit of white with the dark yellow, and I will start adding some highlights. You can see the the white with the yellow here, and that's what I've done. Just building up those tones, darker to lighter. You can see I started etching out with a pencil, camouflage. I hate doing it this way, and I ended up saying, nah, I enjoy just doing freehand. It just seems more intuitive to me, so how many camouflage schemes I've done in my lifetime. So I start with the dark green first here. I'm using one of those new airbrushes with the compressor. It goes on the bottom, and I'm really enjoying it. Big game changer, as I said in the last video. And I'm just freehanding the camouflage here. Years and years of doing this. I really like solid yellow camouflage, which I guess call it camouflage, but a solid yellow tank looks so cool. After I did this one, I was like, wow, I can't wait to do a yellow one and just weather it. The details stand out so well. Next was the red brown, just Tamiya, added in. Just very enjoyable camouflage scheme. Everybody loves the dark yellow, green, and red brown German. I mean, it's like something everybody's been doing forever. It's just, I guess it's the colorful scheme that everybody loves, but it does look cool. I tried to stay away from it from a long time, but sometimes you just can't. And so anyway, I'm doing it on this model, which I enjoyed. And here it is, pretty much all done. It's time to add the decals. Some of them from the kit I use, and then some from other ones I've had in my box, spare decal box. I sprayed it with dull coat, and then I did a misting of just thinned armored yellow with a little bit of white, just to add a faded look to it, as you can see. And then it was time for the most important part of weathering, I say, on a armored vehicle, and that's the wash. I ran out of my shadow brown, so I added burnt umber and black together, artist oils, to make the wash. And I used terpenoid to thin the paints. And you can see, just turn it on its side to do the wheels, so that way they stay up in the cracks instead of all floating down to the bottom. That's what I've always done. If you ever saw my step-by-steps, I have on my website still, you'll see I always did it this way. And then just with the black artist oils, I put around the tires. The best part about the highlighting of the colors before, as I build up from dark to light, is you can just use washes, and those highlight colors show through and bring out a lot of detail. And then with a sponge, I used burnt umber artist oils to do chipping and worn effects onto the vehicle. Take a look at everything as so far. And then I just busted up and ground up a bunch of leaves from trees in the area that were brown and yellow. I don't have a lot of these in Florida, so there was a tree in my neighbor's yard who had some yellowish flowers that were drying up, and I used those and mixed with some brown leaves and ground them all up, and then I mixed up some alcohol and PVA glue and just dab that all in there, and they'll dry up and they stay pretty hard. Now it's time to pour the second layer. I added less color to it so it could give some depth. It's always a challenge and worry when you pour this stuff on your diorama, because you could ruin the whole thing in one shot. And the painter's tape was put around it, and then at the seam I used some clear white glue just to fill that seam and make sure it didn't leak. Obviously here the coffee stir to get it moving around through the area. And then I did use a torch at the end to get rid of the bubbles, and I was so afraid that the torch was going to melt my model, but I was lucky enough I didn't touch it. And then always the moment of truth in these is when you finally peel off that tape and pray that your resin didn't leak anywhere. And I was happy to see the good results. And it was very happy. And then with the knife, I'm going to just trim away a little bit of that excess that builds up along the edge of the tape. It's not as flat as I wanted. Then I started painting the equipment right on the sprue. I haven't done this probably in about 20 years because, you know, you got to trim it. But I trimmed them, and I'm going to hide any of the seams as I put them in the vehicle. The figures were painted flat black first. And as you see in all my videos, I always approach figure painting differently with different projects. These guys had the great coats that were field gray in color. So there's a lot of times where you want to, or at least I want to work up from shadow to highlight, and sometimes from highlight to shadow. And that would be putting in washes to fill the voids for the shadow. And this, as I said, I painted them flat black first. Then I used field gray to airbrush over as the start of the highlight and kind of shadow. And then after I put a coat of field gray over from the top, I mixed flat flesh with it to give the highlight color. And that was obviously here sprayed over the top, and it started giving me my highlight. And I wanted very subtle because I was going to use very subtle acrylics to come back in to do the final shadows and highlights. And then I've got the artist oils out here to paint the face. I'm mixing them up to get my skin tones. I used, like as I said here, just artist oils for the faces only, and there's acrylics for the uniform. Artist oils have to go on very thin where the coat behind them shows through. I did airbrush a little bit of flesh onto their faces, and even though a little bit got on the top of the coat, that was just more highlighting. So you know, you build up your highlight and shadows just with the artist oils. And then I mixed up my acrylics, the flat flesh, in with the field gray and some black with the field gray for the shadow color. And then I just started putting in the shadow color into the creases only, and it worked out really well as I've built these colors up, starting from the airbrush. And then I will use the highlight color I mixed up there to just mix the highlights on. And remember, when you put these highlights on, it's not thick. It's a very thin, translucent coat that you just keep putting over and over. They're all done. Figures are placed in with super glue, and the diorama is finished. I appreciate everyone watching my videos and commenting. I just love answering questions. This was a really pleasing diorama. Lots of modelers in the past have built scenes where the vehicle is at angles like this, dramatic pose of the vehicle. And two, you can actually look inside the vehicle this way, just if it was sitting on a table because of the angle. And since I was going to add all the equipment in there, and you can see the driving compartment, it's kind of cool, so I went ahead and did it that way. The tow cables obviously just wire from an armored kit, and these guys are putting it together and they're talking about pulling it out. Thanks for watching, and appreciate all the support for my channel. Stay tuned for more videos.